Now, let's join ace broadcaster Mamode Akugha as he takes us inside the Niger Delta.
Hello out there and welcome to the program. It's Inside the Niger Delta, the authentic voice of Nigeria's oil-rich region. I am Mamode Akugha. In today's edition of the program, we will kickstart a continuation of the flood disaster that is currently plaguing Niger Delta communities and other parts of the country, and what some philanthropic individuals are doing to bring succor to the victims. Our second and last issue on the program is a special report on the politics of gas flaring in the Niger Delta. The continued flaring of gas in the oil fields of the Niger Delta, as environmental experts submit, produces greenhouse gases that contribute significantly to global warming, which is a major contributor to the depletion of the ozone layer. The outcome is climate change, a causative factor of flooding and several other environmental challenges currently witnessed not only in the Niger Delta, but other parts of the country. Inside the Niger Delta, the authentic voice of Nigeria's oil-rich region will be back after this time out.
Inside the Niger Delta.
Welcome back. It's Inside the Niger Delta, the authentic voice of Nigeria's oil-rich region. Recall that last week on the program, we gave an account of the ongoing flood situation with details of its disastrous effects on the socio-economic lives of affected communities in the Niger Delta. Our findings reveal that thousands of households have been displaced, fishing and farming activities disrupted, and the region's rich biodiversity is now under serious threats on account of the furious floods. And with no end in sight for the floods, the human and economic casualties have been on the rise in the last few weeks. In our ongoing flood series, today's episode is centered on the plight of communities lying within the nation's hydro basin, and they include several scores of communities in Ogba, Egbema, Ndoni, and Ahoda West local government areas of Rivers State, and Bayelsa State in its entirety. The flood-prone status of these major oil and gas-producing communities in the lower Niger Delta plain is essentially defined by their geographical location. This part of Nigeria's oil-rich region is said to be a receptacle for the river Niger, which is in constant interaction with the Benue River and other major water bodies on the West African coast. It is no surprise to observe, therefore, that communities in this hydrological basin are always once hit by the turn of every flood disaster in the country. Throwing more light on the plight of the communities in this part of the Niger Delta since the outbreak of the current flood is Dr. Shadrach Akoloku. Dr. Akoloku is a lawyer, political economist, environmentalist, and politician.
The impacts are twofold. First is the displacement, the dislocation of the human settlements from Ibocha, the biggest flow station, and Obi, where you have Obi flow stations, where you have the LNG taking gas, we have the element petrochemical Indonama taking gas, most of the oil production in that area. You can paddle a hand-pull canoe from Ibocha to Ndoni, a distance of more than 15 kilometers as I speak now. Not a single dry land. Even the federal link road between Ibocha and Ndoni have broken down in many places because of the speed of the water. So that tells you the first impact. So all the homes, all the markets, all the villages, Imonita, Asazaga, Yobogene, Ndoni itself, Ahia meeting, Onitedere, Edea, Abrogwe, Onosiogun, Omoko West, Idu, Krigene, Obrikom, Obobro, Obagi, Obogun, Ede, Ohalielu, Ohalo, so many, all these are villages, Okwizi, in Ebema. These are villages that lie directly on the floodplains of the Niger and the Benue, and the Orash. What it means is that the Niger, the Orash, and the Sombrero have met. So it's now one common sea. So whatever the Niger is distributing evenly across these communities. That's number one impact. The second impact is that there are species that are rare to those areas. The other day I showed on national television, manatee or sea cow, which is a rare species. We call it emia in Oba. There are pythons, gorillas, some wildlife that have been completely washed off or washed ashore by the waters of the Niger. So the species are themselves threatened. The effect of the oil operations that are covered by flood waters and the chemicals that have been produced, what is called the sludge, produced formation water, acid, sulfuric acid, mercury, fluoride, lead, all the dangerous chemicals that are found in wellheads and flow stations and pipelines have now been exhumed and distributed again on the surface waters. And the rest have gone to the subsoil, what we call the aquifer. So when the waters go down, while the surface waters flow into the main rivers and continue downstream to the ocean, the ones that have percolated in concentrations around wellheads and flow stations and borrow pits go into the aquifer and poison sources of drinking water. There are more than 1 million boreholes in the area by those who sink boreholes. So each borehole is a penetration into the aquifer and is therefore a source of poisoning of the underground water. So these are the things that raise alarm about the effects of flooding. So we might talk about flood devastating homes and displacing people, and they create IDPs in the other upper reaches of the Niger. When it comes to the lower Niger, the impact is different. As the water has covered everywhere, you see dead plants, oil palm plantations, banana plantations, plantain plantations. Of course, the vegetables won't survive. Is it those whose poultry farms have been covered? Filling stations. So the economic activity in the area is in its lowest ebb. Now you see something that looks like a semblance of prosperity because people are being forced to harvest their things. What happens from October ending, November, December, January, when the next floods will come in June, July next year? How will they survive? The cassava farms are gone. Now they're harvesting them fast and selling off. So this is the impact, and it's quite tragic.
While the current flood incident is viewed in some quarters as a natural disaster, Dr. Akugha describes it as the outcome of the federal government's inability to manage its vast water resources, a situation that has spelled doom for the country, as the current scenario of flooding suggests.
You have to understand the topography of Nigeria. Nigeria is topographically in this shape. The entire eastern flank, ranging from the Lake Chad onto the Cameroon, onto the Bakassi, is tilted higher than the western flank, ranging from Kebbi, Sokoto, down to Lagos. So that tells you that all the flows that come from Cameroon are swifter. So there are two major rivers in Nigeria. The Niger, that comes all the way from Guinea, through Mali to Niger to Nigeria, picks most of its tributaries. And I'm using these words very clearly. A tributary is where a small river pays homage to a big river. So the Shiroro, the Gurara, the Sokoto, the Rima, the Kaduna, and all of them pay homage to the Niger and flow to Lokoja. The Benue, which rises from the Faro headwaters in Cameroon, receives waters from the Donga, the Katsina Ala, the Mayo Kebi, the Mayo Ine, the Ngurore, the Taraba, the Katsina Ala, all the smaller rivers that flow from Cameroon. And therefore, because of the topography, ranging from the Biu Mountains to the Mandara Mountains to the Adamawa Highlands to the Atlantica, Shepshi, down to the Mambela, then to the Budu, the Urban Hills, down to the Udi Hills. That shape as is descending, so are the waters coming from the Cameroons. Secondly, Cameroon hosts the second rainiest place on earth, called the Bunsha. It records 10,000 millimeters of water annually and records 406 millimeters of water daily. And all these waters in southwest Cameroon come into Nigeria through the Benue. And so everything ends up in the Niger at Lokoja. And then come down, they all come down until it receives the last tributary, which is the Anambra, the largest inland delta in Nigeria. All the waters of these bodies of water from West Central Africa empty into the Niger and pass through River State, because Rivers has boundary with Anambra. The other side is Delta. And then everything that happens in Bayelsa must first of all happen in Rivers. Obebe Mandoni local government area has 50 kilometers of the flow of the river Niger. But each time people talk about the Orash, as if the Orash is the major, Orash is just an indirect distributary of the Niger. The major tributary of the Niger is the Onita, which divides Ndoni into two. If you go to Ndoni today and see how the waters of the Niger are flowing into River State through the Onita Creek, it's when the Onita Creek is inundated that it enters into the Orash. The Niger itself continues until it gets to the north at a place called Osekwenike or Ofunibea, as they just call it. That's the last confluence between rivers and Bayelsa. There, the waters of the Niger go into the north and finish all the communities in Bayelsa. So you can appreciate the volume that is coming. It is what the Niger dashes to the Onita. Onita dashes to the Orash. Orash now dashes to the Sombrero that goes to Ahoda West, Ahoda East, and Abu Aodua, which are the only impacted local government areas in the northwest part of River State, in the hydrological area known as Hydrological Area 5. It has nothing to do with Hydrological Area 7, which is not affected by floods. So when the waters come, the tragedy of the situation is that they do not just come and inundate the low-lying plains. They also cover all the oil wells. So the major challenge in Nigeria is that we have inability to manage the water cycle. What do we mean by the water cycle? The extremity of the two positions. That's what we call the water stress, which is drought, because there is the Saharization of the savanna, the savannization of the rainforest, and the forestization of the mangrove, and down to the Atlantic. So each one is putting pressure on the next vegetation zone, and migrations are taking place because populations must move to where there's water. So when the Sahel is sacked by the Sahel people move to the savannah. The savannah people move to the rainforest. And that's why you have problems on the floodplains of the major rivers in Nigeria between Fulanis and herdsmen and farmers. It's all pressure, water scarcity. Now nobody's talking about herdsmen and farmers clash. They are waiting. When the waters recede, the floodplains grow grass. The farmers want to replant their yams and their peppers and their tomatoes and all their things. And the herdsmen return because they need water. So that is why I talk about the inability to manage the water cycle, the excess water and the lack of water. If we're able to manage our water cycle properly, we should be able to channel the waters of the Benue and the Niger back to the Chad. Even create earth dams, which are prescribed many times. The earth dams are holding grounds. They can run into hundreds of kilometers of water bodies. They're not as expensive as hydroelectric power projects. So that when you are under water stress, you discharge water to the riverbeds, and everybody will have water.
It's been a fantastic analysis of the current flood situation in the country occasioned by poor management of Nigeria's water resources. We cannot agree less with Dr. Akoloku that indeed better water management policies have become inevitable to prevent needless loss of lives and property. Well, in the midst of the painful experiences coming on the heels of the floods in Bayelsa State, succor came the way of victims in Yenagoa local government of the state recently when Kennedy Okoko, a philanthropist and indigene of the area, donated relief materials to the victims.
Our son has decided to bring it to the doorstep of everybody in Baran Kingdom who are affected by this flood. He has love for this kingdom. I want to thank him for his visionary actions.
What Kennedy did is amazing. A good leader is by good steps, by exemplary steps. So by the grace of God, what he did is only God that can give him what he deserves.
What he has provided for the community because of the flood, may the Lord blemish him in Jesus' name.
Speaking during the handover ceremony, Okoko said it was a deliberate intervention of the Kennedy Okoko movement to ameliorate the plight of flood victims not only in Yenagoa but also neighboring communities in Ekpetiama.
Bayelsa for some time has been having all kinds of natural disasters, issues, because the devil does not want us to progress. I understand what it is to lose your hard-earned property and your source of livelihood. That is why I'm here. I'm here because I love the Ijaw Nation, I love Bayelsa State, I love Baran Kingdom, and I love Obuna community. The Bible says, raise a child the way you want and he will not depart from it. I was raised properly by Professor Kimsi Amebi Okoko, who has been an ardent fighter for the Ijaw nation and for Opuna community. So I cannot sit back and see my people suffer. That being said, I decided on my own, without any help from anybody, to go and source for things to try and elevate as much as I can the suffering of my people.
Well, we thank Kennedy Okoko for that wonderful, kind-hearted gesture. And while we appeal to other well-meaning individuals blessed with the privilege of wealth to please lend a helping hand to those in need. Well, next on our lineup is a special report on the history and politics of gas flaring in the Niger Delta. Don't go away.
Happy 56th birthday, Pastor David Ibiomie, Senior Pastor Salvation Ministries, Home of Success, Warwick Communications, and Inside the Niger Delta with Mamode Akugha celebrates you. You were truly a phenomenal general in God's army.
Monday, the 1st of October this year, was a sad day for environmental rights campaigners in the Niger Delta, as it marked yet another setback in their quest to bring the flaring of gas in the region oil fields to an end. On that fateful day, the federal government reportedly increased the penalty on gas flaring to $2 for every 1,000 standard cubic feet of gas flared, despite its earlier threat to revoke operational licenses of companies that continue to flare gas by 2019. In this report, correspondent Tekena Amiofori takes a look at the history and politics of gas flaring in the country.
Soon after the discovery of commercial quantities of crude oil in a Oloibiri community in what is today known as Bayelsa State, exploration and production of the black gold commenced without a plan for the exploitation of its byproducts of natural gas. The uncontrolled flaring of gas by the oil companies saw the emission of large volumes of carbon dioxide and other poisonous gases that took a huge toll on the health of inhabitants of Nigeria's oil-rich region. The greenhouse gases produced by the gas flares equally compromised the health of the environment, which was the people's sole means of livelihood. Invoking the globally acclaimed polluter pays principle, the federal government several years after introduced a regime of penalties for the flaring of gas in the oil fields of the Niger Delta. Under the Associated Gas Reinjection Act of 1984 as amended, oil companies were liable to pay a fine of 2 kobo for every 1,000 standard cubic feet of gas flared. The penalty fee was increased to 50 kobo from July 1992 to December 1997. Following a review of the penalty rates in 1998, the fine for every 1,000 standard cubic feet of gas flared was increased to 10 naira, and that arrangement was to expire in 2028 when the federal government promised to put an end to gas flaring in the country.
It is still cheaper to pay that fine than to stop gas flaring. Like I said, why is this so cheaper? It is cheaper because the infrastructure required to liquefy gas is very expensive.
The joint venture agreement, as far as oil and gas is concerned, so long as it still remains at 60-40, and the supposed owners of the 40, of the 60, cannot even meet up to their own expectation of the joint venture agreement. So what do you expect? The people who hold the 40 will still continue to call the shots.
Barely days after its recent threat to revoke the operational licenses of companies that continue to flare gas as from 2019, the federal government has reportedly slammed a new penalty of $2 for every 1,000 standard cubic feet of gas flared. According to the report, oil companies producing less than 10,000 barrels of crude oil per day will be required to pay a corresponding fee of $0.50 as penalty for gas flaring in the country. The truth, however, remains that the $2 fine mentioned in the media does not amount to an increase in previous penalties imposed on oil companies engaging in gas flaring, When in 2008 the federal government found it practically impossible to bring an end to gas flaring, it had imposed a fine of $3.5 as penalty for every 1,000 standard cubic feet of gas flared by both local and international operators in the oil industry. For what it attributed to government's lack of political will to enforce its own laws, the Nigerian Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative (NEITI) had stated in its 2014 Nigerian Oil and Gas Audit Report that the federal government was constrained to revert to its previous rate of 10 naira as penalty for every 1,000 standard cubic feet of gas flared across the country. According to statistics from the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation (NNPC), oil companies in the country, some of which deliberately refused to comply with the previous penalty rates, flared a total of 4.085 trillion standard cubic feet of gas between 2008 and 2016. Using the old penalty rates, the country lost an estimated 40.85 billion naira in 8 years and a whopping 2.86 trillion naira accruable to the nation's coffers under the revised penalty rate of $3.5 during the period under review.
If you believe in the consequences of gas flaring in this contemporary age where the world is talking about climate change and you're still collecting fines from it, then it means you're irresponsible. That means that the lives of your citizens don't matter. You're collecting about $3.something from it. That's why today you can talk about, it's over 20 years now, you're talking about gas flaring. You don't have a plan. You own 60% of the investment. A man comes with technology, his manpower. He even tells you that there's oil. You didn't even know. By 1950, you didn't know. He told you there's oil. And this is what the oil can be used for. And you have been you're in your fourth republic. You're 50-something years old. You cannot regulate and define how business should be done so that it will not harm the people you're holding power in trust for. It's the height of insensitivity and irresponsibility. It's unexplainable.
We don't clearly think out what we want to do before we come out to the public to make such heavy policy statements. It was not clear-cut. They didn't think it out very well. And I'm surprised it's coming from persons who have been in the oil industry for a number of years. It is embarrassing. And they're making the government look so cheap. We should stop deceiving ourselves and stop contradicting and stop making Nigerians look as if we don't know, we don't have leadership.
Described as one of the worst global ecological sins by the 1992 Rio Summit on Environment and Sustainable Development, as well as the Kyoto Protocol, gas flaring may have been reduced to a mere political issue in Nigeria, even as it continues to take a huge toll on the political stability and socio-economic well-being of Nigeria's Niger Delta region.
The failure of government to be able to enforce its own order against this company means that this company has captured the government. I think that it's very sad that companies can just flout a government order and go away with it. I don't think it can happen in sane environments.
We must look at the opportunities, the prospects, and the commercialization of the gas we are talking about. How would you be flaring gas? Gas is money.
Are we ready to tell the IOCs that we are saying from now 5 years, at the end of 5 years, we should put this on ground to be able to stop the flaring?
The continued flaring of gas in the oil fields of the Niger Delta is in spite of a 2005 Supreme Court ruling that banned the practice after describing it as illegal in the country. The onus is on the federal government to devise a workable gas plan to enable it save billions of dollars lost annually to gas flaring.
And with that special report, we bring the program to a close. But before we go, we bring you a clip from our next edition of the program, where the Bayelsa State Governor, Right Honorable Henry Seriake Dixon, has accused the federal government of fraudulently underpaying Niger Delta states its constitutionally stipulated 13% derivation.
If the Constitution says 13% of derivation to be paid to us, you pay everything that comes into it from the oil sales. You give our 13%, and then if you want, as a political policy, to give subsidy, you want to subsidize fraud by way of these fuel imports that we know that are fake, then you can use your federal share to do that.
Well, keep a date with us on our next edition of the program to watch that quite revealing interview with His Excellency, the Governor of Bayelsa State, Right Honorable Henry Seriake Dixon. Inside the Niger Delta, we'll be back same time, same station next week. I am Mamode Akugha. Bye for now.